Good afternoon. If you're watching us live on the Nonprofit Partnership Facebook page, welcome. We're so glad you're here. If you're not watching us live and watching a recording of this, welcome anyway. We're thrilled that you're watching this interview. This is Carolina Quesada with the Nonprofit Partnership, and I'm going to welcome you to another one of the interviews. We've been doing a series of interviews with nonprofit leaders, and we call this program Our Stories, Our Time. And in this series, we interview nonprofit leaders to understand how organizations are navigating through challenges of these current times. And also, we're learning from leaders about their successes and their breakthroughs. So, before I introduce our guest today, the Nonprofit Partnership wishes to thank the Port of Long Beach for their generous contribution and support of this series. And again, if you are watching us live, we totally invite you to interact with us, chat with us. There's a chat function on the Facebook page if you want to say hi to our special guest or celebrate the organization, please do so. And with that, I want to introduce Everett Glenn, who is the Chief Executive Officer and the Executive Director of BOSS Programs. And BOSS is Business of Student Success. Everett, what a pleasure it is to have you on Our Stories, Our Time. Thank you for joining today.
No, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And so, Everett, tell us a little bit more about you, how you came to be, what brought you to the position that you're holding today. As you chuckle away, you have a good story.
Yeah, but how much time do you have?
Right?
Well, the abbreviated version, I'm from Long Beach, California, by way of Cleveland, Ohio. I was born and raised in Cleveland, in the inner city of Cleveland, to a two-parent household, but dysfunctional. My dad was alcoholic, so it's really one parent, and about a half a parent when you consider what she had been exposed to, my mom. And so it was teachers and I was actually selected to be in a program like BOSS when I was in the 6th grade at Oberlin College. It was a 6-week summer program, residential. So I actually lived in the college dorm. It's the first time I didn't have a roommate or bedmate in this program, right? And then 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, I was in similar programs. And so that kind of experience and extra help and enrichment, or whatever you want to call it, positioned me for the life of success that I've had. And so, but it was, I was inner city kid. I played sports. I played 3 sports. And so I know the importance of, not just physical activity, but the mental benefits that you get from participating in sports, like competition and, learning from defeat and those good things. And so actually I would go back to Oberlin for college after I went there in the 6th grade. And then I was in John Carroll University for 7th grade, and University School 8th grade, in Case Western Reserve for 3 summers while I was in high school. And then I went to Oberlin for college, the first college I went to. And then I went back to go to Case Western Reserve for law school.
Wow.
So I kept it all. It just, if this is about grace and mercy and favor. And so so I would go back to Case Law School after going to Oberlin College. And when I was a teenager, there was a guy in Cleveland, Mark McCormick, who had started the business of representing professional athletes, like them having agents and attorneys. There was a time when they didn't have personal representation. They just they won if they finished the golf match number 1, they won. If they didn't win, they didn't win. But then McCormick came and showed them how they could make money off the field, off the court, and all that kind of stuff. And I grew up watching this guy in Cleveland, and I decided I wanted to be like him. And especially when I considered the domination of Black athletes in sport And I said, if I could do like this guy, then I could have a real impact, because these guys, they got a big platform, they got a big voice. It wasn't so much the money that they made, but more the impact that I could have through them and with and in them as well. And so I developed that was my plan and strategy, and that put that into place, and it became a reality. We teach the boys it takes two things to be successful: know what you want. And so I had decided I wanted to be like one of the top agents and representing players, and then you have to determine the price for what you want, and you have to commit to pay the price in full. And
Right.
so I found out I had to go to law school, and I got to do this, and I got to do that. And so I did all those things, got to pass the bar. And so I was just prepared for that. And that's the same kind of thing, but we putting in these guys what the Bishop T.D. Jakes would say, like what mom and them put into us, right? Because this was all put into me. I wasn't born like this with this, focus and desire and, mindset and that sort of thing. But I was teachable and I was coachable. And
It's amazing though, Everett. I think what you're describing is a journey of situations and people that made such an impression on you, and you knew that you wanted to follow a certain path.
yes,
And you worked really hard for it, and you did it. You got through law school. You practiced law. How many years did you practice law?
well, 45 total. uh, in San Francisco, I'm licensed in Ohio. I practiced there initially, but then when I moved out to California, I took and passed the California bar. So I've been total of 45 years. I'm of counsel to a firm actually down in Orange County, Alvarado and Smith, as we speak, and have a workers' comp firm also that I'm associated with, Glenn Stuckey. But I spend 99% of my time on the program boss.
Yeah, yeah. And this is incredible because you're also describing, I think, what were the very, very initial baby seeds of Boss, because I think that experience that you had lived with you forever. I mean, it lived with you for such a long time, made an impression. But tell us how Boss got started. Why, how did it start? Why did it grow? How did it grow?
Well, it gets started. So after I went to law school and became a lawyer and practiced law for a while, I had decided I wanted to be involved in the sports stuff. And so I became an attorney for some of the top professional
Athlete.
athletes of our
Mhm.
time. I mean, guys like Jerry Rice and Willie Gault and Richard Dent and Reggie White and Gil Bird, who will be talking to our boys actually next Saturday. Gil Bird, he's in the San Diego Chargers Hall of Fame. I guess it's the Los Angeles Chargers now. And he went to San Jose State, and he majored in finance, and he played 10 years in NFL, and he's coached in NFL and coached in college. And so Boss has been a part of me, like unofficially.
Mhm.
And so the boss now is like the official reincarnation of where we're going back and reaching kids when they're in middle school. See, because I intervened in Gil Bird's and Willie Gault's and Clark Kellogg, those guys, like they were in college, they were college students.
Mhm.
Okay, and so the same kind of direction and guidance we try to give them so that they could, we say turn their 15 minutes of fame into a lifetime of good fortune is what we're now trying to instill in some teenagers, the same kind of principles and philosophy, because they work no matter what. They work even in their life, even at this young age. They don't, the challenge for them is to see the application of, again, like a principle that it takes two things to be successful. Because they think we're talking about success, like your ultimate success. But we're saying, even on this test you have next week, if you want to get an A, okay, then you have to determine what's the price you got to pay to get an A. Okay, and then if you want that A, you have to pay that price. And if you pay the price, you'll get the A. And if you don't pay the price, you won't. It's as simple as that, right? And so from representing these players and helping them convert their athletic careers into real life success, it was actually a conversation I had with Clark Kellogg, who is on CBS Sports now, college basketball, about how he wished that even though we met when he was 18, 19 years old, that we could have met earlier, or imagine the kind of impact if we could meet guys earlier because there's a lot of, guys focus on their craft and their sport more so than understanding how the real world works and how money works and how all kind of other stuff works. And so they're prime candidates to be just taken advantage of innocently, intentionally, in all kind of ways, right? Because they just playing their sport. But the guys I've represented, they wanted to learn the business of the sport.
Right.
And that's, I wanted guys who wanted to learn the business. And if you don't want to learn the business, then you're not the kind of guy that we want to represent. And again, so this led into, if we can get some young athletes in middle school and have them use their influence among their peers to get their friends who don't play sports, but want to hang around with Johnny, because Johnny's star on the flag football team or the basketball team or the soccer team. And so we get Johnny in the program, then we can get Jimmy and his friends who come because Johnny's there, right? And then once they come, then they come to, and they stick around long enough, they come to believe that it works.
And so your model really is like you got the power of influence. You clearly understood, even among young kids, young boys, how influence can be such a lever, right, to create. And what you're describing is a positive environment, is a very goal directed, like there are goals in this.
Yeah. Transformation.
Learn about this. It's
We're trying to transform lives, not just touch lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So describe
so it
to us.
like a mindset kind of a thing. And so we started BOSS as a way, because BOSS used to stand for the business of success beyond sports. And so the first group of kids in BOSS who are now in college, like Clark Phillips is a junior at Utah, and he's like all Pac-12 cornerback, and barring injury and with God's grace, he'll be in the NFL in another year. But then we changed it to business of student success, because kids thought you had to be an athlete to be in the program. And we focused on athletes because we knew through the athletes we could get their non-athlete friends.
Yes.
So it's more like a recruiting strategy. Plus, we had a lot of experience working with athletes. I mean, I made a living working with athletes.
Right.
And I know most successful people, I read someplace, look back fondly on their life and their participation in sport as having something to do with it. I don't care if you're a doctor, lawyer, brain surgeon, they played pee-wee basketball or played high school baseball or something.
Right.
Yeah, and so we couldn't tackle the big, we couldn't reach all of the kids because they all need help. When I read that 72.8 or something like that % of Black and brown boys were failing, that's what started BOSS. When I read that statistic, and I said, I knew we could get their attention, and it's really about just keeping their attention in the midst of all this other noise and stuff that they have access to with social media, and just that's. I didn't have to compete with all that kind of stuff when I was coming up, right?
Right. So Everett, walk us through a little bit then. How do these young men then get to experience the program? What are the experiences that they're having?
Oh wow. Well, we start the relationship out with a 2-week camp, which is coming up this July 25th through August 5th, and that's like an intensive 2-week experience where we get to know the boys. We have middle school class, and then we have a high school class. The high school class is mostly kids who'll be going to the 9th grade, maybe, and that's their returning BOSS guys that want to participate and help share, their experience and wisdom with the younger guys. And there's a heavy emphasis on STEM, because not only because we think STEM careers are high paying and that kind of stuff, and there's a big need, but also the kinds of skills that you learn through STEM, like observation and problem solving and understanding fact versus opinion and all of these kinds of things, that you develop them kind of skills that are transferable into something else. So We have field trips. We have speakers come in. I mean, they go to the Port of Long Beach. We'll be back for the first time in 2 years to the port for the harbor tour. You go places like SpaceX, the Aerospace Corporation. We do a lot of heavy math and language arts because those are issues. I mean, if you looked at the 2021 and even before then, the student performance data, I think this year it had over 80% of the Black and brown boys not meeting the math standard and over 60% not meeting the English standards. And at the lower grades, the numbers were even higher,
Right.
if you can believe it. And so, yeah, so we're attacking, so we have a lot of heavy emphasis on math and STEM, not that we're trying to turn them all into scientists necessarily, but if they learn how to, they learn how to think, and that thinking, once they, the process of thinking and not just saying, I don't know, or which is almost like a robotic kind of thing that they say when we meet them, because they're not used to using their voice even. And so
and it's like, yeah, and it's like you're saying too, I mean, even if the students won't necessarily specialize in mathematics, but there's an exposure, right, of all of that and all those topic areas. What are they also experiencing mentoring and mentorship with others in the field? And maybe, you know, earlier you also talked about a little bit of this peer mentor, or maybe it's just
two levels of mentoring. So we
yeah.
have college kids who are like academic coaches, we call them. So they're like upperclassmen at Long Beach State and USC and surrounding schools, or some graduate students. And we put them through training on these, what we call good to great principles. It's just a whole philosophy and mindset of, you know, things that if you can come to believe them and use them in your life, then it's going, you know, you're going to have much success. I mean, like a life philosophy of no excuses, right? Go the extra mile, learn from defeat, work on yourself, cultivate a moral compass. Failure is a prerequisite to success. Become comfortable becoming uncomfortable. Commit to being unconsciously competent in everything that you do. Be willing to accept change. Have a high willingness to be teachable and coachable. You know, these are the kinds of principles that if they said, if you don't make no excuses, then we don't have to be on you about your grades, because we're teaching you about not making excuses. We're not so much focused on your grades, because only reason you don't do well there is you're making an excuse. So we teach you not to make excuses. You'll handle that. You follow? So ours is not so much just focused on the academics, although we do have tutoring, daily tutoring from 4 to 7. And then they have this academic coach who's this college upperclassman or, you know, graduate student. And then we bring in all kind of folk, and they have access to, we participate in a number of different, the Alliance is one program we participate in. That's the organization of the 11 pro sport franchises in Southern California. You know, Dodgers, Angels, Clippers, Lakers, Rams, Chargers, Kings, Ducks, LA Football Club, and the Galaxy, and then the Sparks. They provide like career exposure opportunities. So most recently we went to an Angels game, and we had like a tour of the stadium, and then we had like a panel discussion with some of the Angels executives, and then they get taken the game. We did that with the Dodgers, a similar kind of experience with LA Kings. And so we give them real career exposure and networking. And so this stuff, we preparing them for these kinds, as they get older, these are the kinds of experiences we can share with them, which is why as they're younger, we're trying to fortify them, you know, to get them to just understand how they have to take this, they're building their own life.
And, you know, engaging with the sports teams and having, I think, that exposure probably makes your program even a lot more attractive, and they want to stay in. They want to continue to engage. So walking this back a little bit, Everett, so you indicated that the way that the young men just sort of start working with you, engaging in your program, it kind of starts during the summer. What does it look like for them to then continue to work through BOSS the rest of the school year or throughout the rest of the year? Is this where some of that mentoring and school support that you described comes into play?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have daily tutoring from 4 to 7. So that's from September to June to today. So my
Mhm.
tutoring, it starts in half an hour. Okay.
So we're on a timer.
No, and so then every other week we get together in person at Long Beach State. Like we were just together at Long Beach State this past Saturday, and we had the meeting was like, so we have both built on 6 pillars: mental, physical, spiritual, economical, social, and economic and physical. And
Mhm.
so this past Saturday was a mental boss day. And so we talked about these 2 things it takes to be successful. And we had them break them down and apply them to little things that they want. Like if you want a pair of Nikes or a backpack, that's a desire. Okay, so then you have to determine the price that you got to pay. And, you know, because again, we're not talking about the end of your career. If you start looking at things like that, where if I want something, and then I just have to determine the price that I have to pay to get it. And that's how you get it.
Yeah. Well,
So
and it's to your point earlier, though. I mean, what the young men are learning about, they're not just getting exposed to it, but they're learning how to do this. It's these principles, it's these pillars, and they're learning through your program how you apply those principles in your everyday life. You know, I'm kind of curious to know, these
and
young men go
so
through your program, how many of them actually stay in sports? Or, do
well, I
they?
mean, the ones who, I mean, if we simply meet them in middle school, the only ones who don't stay is the ones who don't make the high school team. You
Okay.
know, because if they make the high school team, then they continue to play and continue to be involved with us. And we're flexible because we have kids who play sports, so we know sometimes they have practice or games, and then we support them in their practice and games.
Okay.
We go to their games and that kind of stuff and support them. But so we have these every other gatherings, every other week gatherings. We have daily tutoring, and then they have an academic coach. This college kid, he checks in on his team of kids once a
Hmm.
week, right?
Hmm.
And so he's calling them, just making sure, you know, that they're using the tools that we have to support them, and the math tool that we have. That's
So there's ongoing support. There's like these
yes,
regular
yeah,
touch points they're getting with
yeah.
their mentors. That
And
must
then we
be
have
huge in the life of a young man, right?
And then
Just
we
to
have all these
have
other
that.
things like what these team
Yeah.
sponsored kind of things where we go to and visit. Like now we're getting next up is the Galaxy. They'll be
Ooh.
going to the stadium, I guess, Dignity, and getting a tour of that and meeting some, you know, front office kind of people from the Galaxy, and then going to the game. And so the kids, they play sports. So some of these guys actually play soccer. So this would be like, you know, to get this kind of experience because they play soccer for that, like
Yeah.
Milliken, like Jacob Brandon, one of our kids, he plays soccer. So
Right.
he's gonna bring some of his teammates actually to the
So
game. That's
so Everett, for the folks who are listening right now and they're like, I got to get a hold of Everett. I have to get a hold of somebody at Boss.
uh-huh.
What is the best way to contact you? Is it your website? Is it your email? Share with us what that best way of communicating with you is.
Well, yeah, well, you can contact us through the website, which is plural programs.org, and or the email is eglenn, EGLENN at bossprograms.org, eglenn@bossprograms.org, and
Great. And again, Boss Programs is BOSS, Boss Programs.
programs.org.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Great. Great.
My cell
And
is 562-619-8460. You can text me. I mean, I'm accessible. I'm not
Everett is
avoiding
accessible.
people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everett, what is that number again? 562.
562-619-8460.
Okay. There we
Yeah. And
go.
then the last point, if we have time, so
Yes, we do.
they interact with
Yes.
their college coach, who's their academic coach, and then we bring people, like I said, Gil Bird, he's next up. We created this series called Boss Talks uh, during the pandemic, you know, to increase our engagement. And so I'm bringing all my friends. They've talked to Harvey Mason Jr., who's president of the Recording Academy. They've talked to Clark Kellogg, who's #1 guy on CBS College basketball. They've talked to a guy who's an investment banker out of New York. They
Mm-hmm.
talked to a doctor out of Chicago. We just bring them on these Zooms, and these guys just share their stories from where they came from, where they started, and where they are now,
Yes.
and how they got there, and the ups and downs, and the different things they had to learn and principles, and then we just talk about how it relates to what we're trying to teach these kids, because we just pull it out of everybody's life, right? Because all this stuff is, I mean, anybody successful has, unless somebody handed it to you, you've had, similar experiences. You've had
You've
success,
had
you've had
struggles, and you've
failure.
had struggles that you have to overcome. And before we went live, and by the way, Everett, we do have a few more minutes.
Mhm.
We're not done yet.
Okay.
But thank you for sharing your contact information. Some
Yeah.
folks might be thinking, I need to
That's-
send Everett a quick email here. So, we were just talking about this before we went live, and I was asking you about, hey, Everett, I'm going to ask you about the pandemic times,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
you've been able to acclimate. And you said, well, I mean, we've been able to continue to engage people from all sorts of time zones. And so you have, continued to make sure that the young men in your program have these role models, that they're listening to them, that you've got this programming that you continue to build, and you're engaging them, not just virtually, but also in person.
Yeah. We do, but then we just now virtual is a permanent part of our programming though, because
Ah,
virtual, again, we can bring in people uh, that I know who, some part of the
mm-hmm,
country or the world, and
mm-hmm.
right into their living rooms, and they just all we do is coordinate time zones, and it's like watching a movie, sort of like it's almost like a barbershop kind of conversation that it turns into, because we have some of my friends who are older guys who also join us. Like there's Dr. Marvin Bishop, who put the good, the great into us, and then there's Bobby Franklin. He played basketball, and he's a former Mattel executive. And then there's another guy, Wade Manning. These are all from Cleveland, and I'm from Cleveland. So we're among a group of guys that succeeded in spite of the odds against us in Cleveland, and we remain in touch. And so these are like my like wise counselors. So they're just on the calls, and they just lead the conversation, or they'll ask the guests some questions to get the kids started to ask, that kind of thing. And then they share their experience and wisdom on everything with the kids too.
Yes,
These guys. So
right.
we have to kick the kids off the calls because they just want
They
to
don't
keep
want to
talking.
get off the
They
call.
want to keep talking.
Well, and see, it's what happens when, even as a young person, you're hearing the story, and man, there's something about that story you're listening to that you can really engage to. You want to ask more questions. You're curious.
Oh, I mean, and they tell the good and the bad. I mean, and they talk
Oh, I
about,
bet.
and
I
yeah, I mean,
bet.
because it wasn't all, I mean, even the guy who was way up here, I mean, the story wasn't all, it didn't just go from here to here. It went from here
Right.
to here, down
Right.
here, over
Right.
here, over.
Now,
Yeah.
Everett, shifting gears just a little bit, it's important for folks who are learning about BOSS programs to understand also this impact of your programs as far as numbers. And I remember last year when you and I were talking about BOSS, you told me this percentage of young men who go through your program, and they're very successful in getting through to other educational programs. Tell us about that pathway for success that the young men in your program are experiencing.
Well, if that's a good question. And today, actually, I saw it like in an email. We
Mhm.
have this benefactor. His name is Greg Perlman. I hope you don't mind me just saying his name, but he's like an angel from God. I'm telling you. And him and his wife, they're sharing their fortune with people while they're living, and they help our families with what they call an angel fund.
Mm.
And so and we just met with them the other day, and they actually asked us if we could. They were trying to come up with ways they could help more of our families in different ways.
Yeah.
And so one of the change reaction people, because they know what schools our kids go to. So we got a group of kids who are at St. Anthony's and Bosco and Orange Lutheran and Loyola,
Mhm.
and but they didn't start off. They went to middle school like at Marshall or,
Yeah.
or Tensioner or something like that. But they now they can compete academically, right? And so, and they play sports, so they get recruited to these schools. We're not like trying to push them. We just stay with them wherever, what school they go to, right? And so they wanted to, they said, let's come up with a tuition assistance where we could help meet, because all these families having to pay some portion of the tuition to go to St. Anthony's or Bosco or whatever. And we got about 8 or 9 kids at St. Anthony's. And so we had to put together an email, and they wanted to know the kid and his grade point average and what school he went to, and like the family situation, like is the single parent or whatever, and how, so, and just in an email, and then they highlighted the GPAs, right? And when I looked at like all these GPAs were like 3.6, 3.8, 3.9, 4. And I'm just looking at them, right? And I could send you that email because I was like, wow, because that's what I tell these kids when, so we have these relationships, but we can't, if you don't meet the requirement, we can change the requirements, right? We're not trying to change the requirements. We want you to compete. And now if I could send this gentleman something and he see, wow, I'm supporting some kids who they serious about their futures. I mean, they serious now because, they're, and so I was, so yeah, it's, we don't care where they are. We don't cherry pick. They don't all come to us like that, and wherever they come, they get better. That's really it's like RJ Jenkins, he was a 3.0, now he's 4.2.
Wow. And that's what has stayed with me since you shared with me last year. I remember that's really what stayed with me is this comment you just made. Wherever they are and however they come to us, they get better. And I remember there was a really high figure you were sharing with me of success rate of these young men actually going on and exactly what
well,
you're
I mean, in
saying,
terms of college,
getting
but
better.
we've had 7 graduates and all 7 of them in college. And then we got this year a group of about 12, 15, they all gonna be in college. Some of them are going to community college just for financial reasons, but they got into 4-year colleges, but they can, like at City or Cerritos, do a year or 2 for like a couple $100 instead of 50,000.
Thousands of dollars. But I think the story here is that they're on their way. Like they are on a pathway now. And by virtue of engaging with BOSS programs, they know what the possibilities look like. And they also know that they do have the support network. So as we're wrapping up now, and Everett, so grateful for you spending time with us today. And we're really kind of getting to know, what led to the beginning and the launch of BOSS programs. Share with us again that website. It's www.
BOSS, BOSS, BOSS programs, programs.org, bossprograms.org. Yeah.
And we know your number, and I'm going to share it because I wrote it down here. If you want to get a hold of Everett, now, whether you want to talk about BOSS programs, engaging in the programs maybe for youth that you're working with or a young person in your life, or you want to sponsor, his number 562-619-8460. Direct
absolutely,
line.
because we could definitely, the more help, the more kids we can help.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
right.
And it's all about those faces that are right behind you and all the young men that we're not seeing.
Don't they clean up good?
Hey, Everett, it has been such a pleasure. I know usually you and I get to talk about different kinds of like training or consulting, but it's been such a pleasure getting to know the real story here and how it came to be. And I have, ever so much respect and admiration and just the passion behind this work. So Everett, thank you very much. Everyone joining us, thank you.
Right, thank you.
Please,
for sure. And I posted it up on my Facebook too. I copied it and put it on my before we get started. So I don't know who checked in, but it was up there. I copied it from up here. You can click on it and copy the link.
Well, I hope we get a lot of great views.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.